The man standing at the hospital window wasn't supposed to be there. At least, that's what the woman in the bed would have said if she'd known who he was. But she didn't. She looked at him with the blank curiosity of a stranger, her eyes searching his face for something that should have been there but wasn't. Lucas Chen had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in the 3 weeks since the accident, but nothing could have prepared him for the way her gaze passed over him like he was made of glass. 5 years of marriage, erased. 5 years of love, laughter, arguments, reconciliations, dreams whispered in the dark, all of it gone, as if he'd never existed in her life at all. The doctors said the memories might return. They also said they might not. What they didn't say, what no one seemed willing to acknowledge, was the cruelest truth of all, that Lucas would have to watch the woman he loved fall in love with someone else, or worse, remain forever indifferent to him. But here's what nobody knew yet, not even Lucas himself. Helena hadn't forgotten everything. Deep in the locked rooms of her fractured mind, something remained, something that would change everything, something that would prove that love doesn't live in memory alone. The accident happened on a Tuesday, which Helena would later think was fitting, because Tuesdays had always felt like the forgotten day of the week, overlooked and underestimated. She'd been driving home from the art gallery where she worked, her mind occupied with thoughts of the new exhibition they were planning, when a truck ran a red light. The impact sent her car spinning across 2 lanes of traffic. She didn't remember the collision itself, the screaming of metal, the shattering of glass, or the way her head struck the window with enough force to change the trajectory of her entire life. What she remembered when she finally woke up in the hospital were fragments: a child's birthday party when she was 7, the smell of her mother's perfume, the taste of strawberries, the feeling of rain on her skin. But of the last 5 years, there was nothing but a vast, echoing emptiness. Lucas had been in a meeting when he got the call. He'd dropped everything, left his client sitting in the conference room, and driven to the hospital with his heart hammering so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. When he first saw her, tubes and wires connecting her to machines that beeped and hummed, her face pale against the white pillow, he'd felt the world tilt beneath his feet. He'd stood by her bed for hours, holding her hand, whispering her name, begging her to wake up. When she finally did, 3 days later, her first words were not to him, but to the nurse. "Where am I?" she'd asked, her voice hoarse and confused. The nurse had smiled, relieved, and said, "You're in the hospital, dear. You've been in an accident, but you're going to be okay." Then Helena's eyes had found Lucas, and she'd asked the question that shattered him. Who is he? The neurologist, doctor. Patricia Reeves had explained it to them both with the careful, measured tone of someone delivering news she'd delivered too many times before. Retrograde amnesia, she'd called it. Helena had lost approximately 5 years of memories, possibly more. The brain was a mystery, Dr. Reeves had said, and while some patients recovered their memories within weeks or months, others never did. There was no way to predict which group Helena would fall into. All they could do was wait and hope. Lucas had nodded, absorbing the information even as his world crumbled around him. But it was Helena's reaction that surprised him. She'd looked at him with a kind of detached sympathy, the way you might look at a stranger who'd just received bad news and said, "I'm sorry, I wish I could remember you." The word remember hung in the air like an accusation. Helena's parents had arrived the next day, her mother crying, her father stoic and worried. They'd explained everything to her, who she was, where she lived, what she did for work, and they'd explained Lucas. "He's your husband," her mother had said, reaching for Helena's hand. "You've been married for 5 years. You love him very much." Helena had looked at Lucas again, really looked at him this time, taking in his disheveled dark hair, the shadows under his eyes, the way his hands gripped the armrest of the chair as if he needed something to anchor him. He was handsome. She could see that objectively, with strong features and kind eyes that held something she couldn't quite name. But she felt nothing. No recognition, no warmth, no flutter of affection. He was a stranger who happened to share her last name. "I'm sorry," she'd said again, and Lucas had seen something in her eyes that frightened him more than the amnesia itself. Pity. The doctors wanted to keep Helena for observation for another week, running tests and monitoring her recovery. During that time, Lucas visited every day, but he'd made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He wouldn't tell Helena they were married, not yet. The doctors had warned him that forcing memories or overwhelming her with information about their shared past could potentially make things worse, could cause her to retreat further or create false memories to fill the gaps. So Lucas introduced himself simply as someone who cares about you, and Helena, perhaps grateful for the ambiguity, had accepted this without question. He brought her books and magazines, sat with her while she ate her meals, and told her stories about the city, about art, about everything except themselves. And slowly, tentatively, Helena began to warm to him, not as a husband, but as this kind stranger who visited her every day. What Lucas didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Helena felt something when he was there, not memory exactly, but a feeling, a comfort, a sense that when he was in the room, the world was somehow more right, more balanced, as if his presence filled a space she hadn't realized was empty. She didn't tell him this because she didn't understand it herself, and besides, it seemed cruel to give him false hope when she genuinely couldn't remember anything about him or their life together. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each visit, until she found herself looking forward to the sound of his footsteps in the hallway, the way he always knocked softly before entering, the gentle smile he gave her that seemed to hold both joy and sadness in equal measure. When Helena was finally discharged from the hospital, the question of where she would go became complicated. She couldn't return to the apartment she'd shared with Lucas, because to her it wasn't her home. It was a stranger's home, filled with memories and mementos she had no connection to. Her parents had offered to let her stay with them, and after much discussion, it was decided that this was the best option, at least temporarily. Lucas had agreed, even though it meant being separated from his wife, even though it meant watching her leave the hospital with her parents while he stood alone in the parking lot, feeling like he'd lost her all over again. But he'd also made another decision. He wasn't going to give up. He was going to find a way back into her life, into her heart, even if it meant starting from the beginning, even if it meant courting his own wife as if they'd just met. The plan came to him over several sleepless nights, and it was both simple and terrifying. He would pursue Helena the way he'd pursued her the first time they met, but with one crucial difference. This time, he knew her. He knew her favorite foods, her secret fears, the way she liked her coffee, the songs that made her cry, the places that brought her joy. He had 5 years of intimate knowledge that she didn't even know he possessed. Some might have called it an unfair advantage. Lucas called it survival. He reached out to her a week after she'd left the hospital, sending a carefully crafted text message that struck a balance between friendly and interested. "Hi, Helena. It's Lucas. I know things are complicated right now, but I was wondering if you'd like to grab coffee sometime. No pressure, just thought it might be nice to talk outside the hospital." He'd rewritten it a dozen times before sending it, his finger hovering over the send button for a full minute before he finally pressed it. Helena had stared at the message for almost an hour before responding. Part of her wanted to say no, to maintain the clean break from this man who represented a life she couldn't remember. But that feeling, that strange sense of rightness when he was near, made her hesitate. Finally, She'd typed back, "Coffee sounds nice." When? They'd met the following Saturday at a small cafe in the Arts District, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and local artwork on the walls. Lucas had gotten there early, choosing a table by the window where the afternoon light would be best, ordering her a vanilla latte with extra foam before she arrived, because he knew that's what she always ordered. When Helena walked in, wearing a simple blue dress and looking nervous, Lucas felt his breath catch. Even now, even without knowing who he was, she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Their conversation started awkwardly, both of them too aware of the weight of what wasn't being said. But gradually, as they talked about neutral topics, art, the weather, books they'd read, something shifted. Helena found herself laughing at Lucas's jokes, leaning forward when he spoke, feeling that inexplicable pull toward him growing stronger. Lucas, for his part, was careful not to reveal too much, to let her discover him as if for the first time, even though every fiber of his being wanted to reach across the table and take her hand and tell her everything. When they parted ways 2 hours later, Helena realized she wanted to see him again, soon, and Lucas, walking back to his car with a lightness in his step he hadn't felt in weeks, allowed himself to hope. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a pattern. Coffee dates became lunch dates, which became dinner dates. Lucas courted Helena with the patience of a man who had nothing to lose and everything to gain. He took her to art galleries, knowing she loved contemporary sculpture, but pretending he was just guessing. He surprised her with tickets to a concert by a band he thought she might like, knowing for a fact they were her favorite. He listened to her talk about her work at the gallery, about her attempts to rebuild her life, about the frustration of being told stories about herself that felt like they belonged to someone else. And through it all, he fell in love with her again, or perhaps more accurately, he discovered that he'd never stopped being in love with her, that love wasn't something that required memory or recognition, that it existed independent of all of that. Helena, meanwhile, was experiencing something she hadn't expected. She was falling in love. It happened slowly at first, then all at once. She loved the way Lucas listened to her, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to talk, but genuinely absorbing what she said. She loved his laugh, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. She loved that he never pushed her to remember, never made her feel guilty for the blank spaces in her mind. With him, she could just be who she was now, not who she used to be. And that feeling she'd had from the beginning, that sense of rightness, had grown into something deeper, something that made her heart race when she saw his name on her phone, something that made her think about him constantly, wondering what he was doing, wishing he was there. One night, lying in her childhood bedroom at her parents' house, Helena admitted to herself what she'd been trying to deny. She was in love with Lucas Chen. But there was a problem, and it was one that Helena couldn't ignore. Everyone kept telling her that Lucas was her husband. Her parents had finally sat her down one evening and explained the full situation, that Lucas had chosen not to overwhelm her with their history, that he'd been giving her space to recover and rediscover herself, but that they had a life together, an apartment, shared finances, friends, a marriage. Helena had listened with growing horror, not because the idea of being married to Lucas was unpleasant, but because it felt like a deception. Why hadn't he told her? Why had he let her believe they were just meeting for the first time? The betrayal she felt was irrational. She knew that, but it was there nonetheless. That night she'd sent Lucas a text. "We need to talk." They met the next day at the same cafe where they'd had their first post-accident coffee date, but this time the atmosphere was different. Helena sat with her arms crossed, her expression guarded, and Lucas knew immediately that she'd found out. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked before he could even sit down. Lucas lowered himself into the chair slowly, choosing his words carefully. "Because the doctor said not to overwhelm you with information you couldn't process." Because I wanted you to get to know me without the pressure of who we used to be. Because—" he paused, looking down at his hands. "Because I was terrified that if I told you we were married, you'd feel obligated to feel something you didn't feel. And I couldn't bear that. I wanted whatever grew between us to be real." Helena felt her anger soften slightly, but she held on to it. "You let me fall in love with you under false pretenses," she said, and Lucas's head snapped up. "You're in love with me?" The question came out barely above a whisper, and Helena saw the naked hope in his eyes, the vulnerability, and suddenly she couldn't hold on to her anger anymore. "Yes," she admitted, "I'm in love with you. But I don't know if what I feel is real or if it's just some echo of what I felt before, some muscle memory of the heart that my brain can't access." Lucas leaned forward, his eyes intense. "It's real, Helena. Everything we've felt over these past weeks, every moment, every conversation, every time we've laughed together or sat in comfortable silence, that's real. The past is gone, maybe forever, and I've made my peace with that. But this, what we have now, this is ours. We're building something new." Helena wanted to believe him, but there was still doubt. "How can you be okay with this? How can you be okay with me not remembering our wedding, our life together, everything we shared?" Lucas reached across the table and took her hand, and Helena let him, feeling that now familiar sense of rightness at his touch. "Do you want to know what I realized?" Lucas said softly. "I realized that love isn't stored in memory. It's not a collection of moments we can file away and retrieve when we need them. Love is something that exists in the present, in how we treat each other, in how we make each other feel right now, in this moment. You don't remember our wedding day, but so what? We can get married again if you want. You don't remember our first kiss, but we've kissed since your accident, and that kiss was just as real, just as meaningful. The Helena I fell in love with 5 years ago, and the Helena sitting across from me now are the same person. You're not less because you can't remember. You're just different, and I love the person you are now just as much as I loved the person you were then." Helena felt tears streaming down her face, and she wasn't sure when she'd started crying. Everything Lucas was saying made sense, but there was still a part of her that felt like she was betraying the old Helena, the one who'd built a life with this man, by not being able to remember any of it. "What if my memories come back?" she asked. "What if I wake up one day and remember everything, and I realize that I was different before, that we were different? What if I can't reconcile who I am now with who I was then?" Lucas squeezed her hand gently. "Then we'll figure it out together. Helena, I'm not asking you to be anyone other than who you are. I'm not trying to resurrect the past or force you to fit into some mold of who you used to be. I'm just asking you to give us a chance, to give what we have now a chance. Can you do that?" Helena looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just the man she'd come to love over the past weeks, but something more. She saw someone who'd suffered quietly, who'd put his own pain aside to help her heal, who'd been patient and kind and understanding, even when it must have been tearing him apart. She saw someone who loved her enough to let her go and fight to win her back, all at the same time. And in that moment, she made a decision. "Yes," she said, "I can do that." The smile that broke across Lucas's face was like sunrise, and when he came around the table and pulled her into his arms, Helena felt, for the first time since waking up in that hospital bed, like she was home. They started over, but not entirely. Lucas showed Helena their apartment, let her walk through the rooms at her own pace, taking in the life she couldn't remember. She looked at their wedding photos with a strange detachment, like she was viewing someone else's memories, but she also felt a pang of sadness for the woman in those pictures, radiant and unaware of what was coming. Helena decided she wanted to move back into the apartment, but slowly. She started staying over a few nights a week, getting used to the space, to sharing a home with Lucas again. They slept in separate rooms at first, Helena needing that boundary, that space to process everything. Lucas didn't push, didn't complain. He just made her breakfast in the mornings and kissed her gently before she left for work. And slowly, Helena began to feel like maybe this could work. One evening, about 2 months after her discharge from the hospital, Helena was looking through a box of old photographs that her mother had brought over, trying to piece together the life she'd lost. She found pictures of herself with friends she didn't recognize, at places she'd apparently been, doing things she had no memory of doing. It was disorienting and sad, like looking at a stranger's life. But then she found something else. A journal. Her journal from about 6 months before the accident. Helena opened it with trembling hands, feeling like she was about to intrude on someone's privacy, even though that someone was supposedly her. The entries were mundane at first, complaints about work, notes about what she'd eaten for lunch, plans for the weekend. But then she came to an entry that made her stop breathing. Had a huge fight with Lucas today, the entry read, dated about 4 months before the accident. Worst one we've ever had. He wants to start trying for a baby, and I told him I'm not ready. He didn't understand, said we'd been talking about it for years, that we'd always planned to start a family before I turned 30. But the truth is, I'm scared. Scared of losing myself. Scared of becoming just someone's mother. Scared that a baby will change everything between us. He was so hurt. Said he feels like I'm moving the goalposts, like I'm backing out of promises I made. We both said things we shouldn't have. He slept on the couch. I cried myself to sleep. I don't know how to fix this. I love him so much, but I'm terrified that this is the thing that will break us. Helena read the entry 3 times, feeling like she'd been punched in the gut. This was information Lucas had never mentioned, a conflict he'd kept hidden. That night, when Lucas came home from work, Helena was waiting for him with the journal in her lap. "We need to talk," she said, and Lucas must have heard something in her voice because he immediately sat down, his expression wary. "I found my journal," Helena said, holding it up. "I read about our fight, about the baby discussion." Lucas closed his eyes, and Helena saw pain flash across his face. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Why didn't you mention that we were having problems before the accident?" Lucas opened his eyes and looked at her directly. "Because it didn't matter," he said. "Helena, every couple has fights, has disagreements. Yes, we were going through a rough patch. Yes, we had that fight about starting a family, but it doesn't change the fact that I love you, that I've always loved you, even when we were arguing, even when things were hard. But don't you see," Helena said, her voice rising, "this changes everything. What if the reason I don't remember you is because some part of me didn't want to? What if my brain is protecting me from a marriage that was failing?" Lucas shook his head firmly. "Our marriage wasn't failing. We were just going through something that a lot of couples go through. Helena, do you know what happened the night before your accident?" She shook her head, and he continued. "We had just come back from a weekend away, just the 2 of us. We'd talked through everything, really talked. You'd explained to me why you were scared, and I'd finally understood. We'd decided to table the baby discussion for a year, to focus on us, on our marriage, on traveling and enjoying our life together. We were happy, Helena. We were in a good place. The fight was in the past." Helena wanted to believe him, but the doubt was there, planted by words she herself had written. "How do I know that?" she challenged. "How do I know you're not just telling me what I want to hear?" Lucas stood up and walked to the bookshelf in the living room. He pulled down a photo album, flipped to a specific page, and brought it back to Helena. "Look," he said, pointing to a series of pictures. They showed Helena and Lucas in what looked like a vineyard, both of them laughing, holding wine glasses, looking at each other with obvious affection. "This was from that weekend, 2 days before your accident. Do we look like a couple in crisis to you?" Helena studied the photos, seeing the joy in both their faces, the way they were touching each other, hands intertwined, arms around waists, foreheads pressed together. They looked happy, in love. But still, the doubt remained. Over the next few days, Helena found herself analyzing everything, looking for cracks in the foundation Lucas had built, wondering if she was being naive or if her suspicions were justified. She talked to her parents, who confirmed that Lucas and Helena had seemed very happy in the weeks before the accident. She even reached out to some of the friends she'd discovered in her photos, explaining her situation and asking about her relationship with Lucas. Everyone said the same thing. They'd been a strong couple, in love, going through normal marriage stuff, but fundamentally solid. Slowly, Helena's doubts began to ease, replaced by a different realization. She was looking for reasons not to trust this, not to believe in their relationship, because on some level she was still scared. Scared of committing to a life she couldn't remember, scared of failing at a marriage she'd apparently already built once. One night, Helena was lying in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, when she heard a sound from the other room. She got up and quietly walked down the hallway, stopping outside the master bedroom where Lucas slept. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap she could hear him talking. For a moment she thought he was on the phone, but then she realized he was talking to himself, or praying, or maybe talking to her, the old her, the Helena who was gone. "I don't know what to do," Lucas was saying, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm trying so hard to do the right thing, to give her space, to let her come to this in her own time. But I miss you. I miss my wife. Not the new version or the old version, just you. I miss us. And I'm so scared that I'm going to lose you forever, that you're going to wake up one day and decide that this is too hard, that I'm too much of a reminder of everything you've lost." Helena felt her heart crack open as she listened to his whispered confession. She'd been so focused on her own pain, her own loss, that she hadn't fully grasped what this had been like for Lucas. He hadn't just lost his wife to an accident. He'd lost her to amnesia, and then had to watch her walk away, and then had to fight to win her back, all while carrying the memories of what they'd had alone. He'd been strong for her, patient for her, understanding for her, all while quietly breaking apart inside. Helena pushed the door open, and Lucas looked up, startled, quickly wiping at his eyes. "I'm sorry," Helena said softly. "I'm sorry for doubting us. I'm sorry for being so focused on what I've lost that I couldn't see what you've lost too. And I'm sorry that I can't be the Helena you married, that I can't give you those memories back." Lucas stood up, crossing the room to her. "You don't have anything to apologize for," he said. "None of this is your fault." Helena shook her head. "I know that, intellectually. But I also know that I've been holding back, keeping you at arm's length because I'm scared. But Lucas, you've been fighting for us from the beginning, and it's time I started fighting too." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I love you. I don't remember falling in love with you the first time, but I know how it happened the second time. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't need the past to build a future." Lucas pulled her into his arms, and Helena felt the tension that had been living in her body for months finally start to release. "I love you too," Lucas whispered into her hair. "I've loved you through 5 years of marriage, and I've loved you through these months of rediscovery, and I'll keep loving you for whatever comes next." That night, Helena moved her things into the master bedroom, and for the first time since the accident, they slept in the same bed, wrapped in each other's arms. Helena didn't have memories of all the other nights they'd done this, but she didn't need them. This moment was enough, complete in itself. In the weeks that followed, they settled into a new normal. Helena went back to work at the gallery, finding comfort in the familiar routines, even if she couldn't remember all the specifics. Lucas continued with his architecture firm, though he'd cut back his hours to spend more time with Helena. They went to couples therapy, which Dr. Reeves had recommended, and slowly worked through the unique challenges of their situation. Helena learned to stop apologizing for not remembering and to embrace the life they were building now. Lucas learned to let go of his grief for what they'd lost and to fully invest in what they were creating. For months after the accident, Helena had her first glimmer of a recovered memory. They were cooking dinner together, Lucas teaching her how to make his grandmother's dumplings, when suddenly Helena froze, the rolling pin falling from her hand. "I've done this before," she said, her voice strange. "Not just this recipe, but this exact moment. You were standing right there, telling me I was rolling them too thin, and I threw flour at you, and we ended up in a flour fight all over the kitchen." Lucas stared at her, hardly daring to breathe. "Yes," he said carefully. "That was about 2 years ago. It was a Saturday afternoon. You do remember." Helena closed her eyes, trying to hold on to the memory, but it was already fading, slipping away like water through her fingers. "It's gone," she said, opening her eyes, and Lucas heard the frustration in her voice. "It was there for just a second, and now it's gone." But it was a beginning. Over the next few weeks, more fragments came back. Never complete memories, but flashes, sensations, moments that surfaced briefly before disappearing again. Helena remembered the feeling of dancing at their wedding, though she couldn't remember the wedding itself. She remembered the sound of Lucas's laugh from some moment in their past, though she couldn't place when or where. Each recovered fragment was both a gift and a torment, evidence that the memories were still there somewhere, locked away in the damaged parts of her brain. Dr. Reeves explained that this was a positive sign, that Helena's brain was slowly healing, creating new pathways to access old information. But she also warned them not to get their hopes up too much. The memories might continue to return in fragments, or they might not return at all. There was still no way to predict or control it. 6 months after the accident, Helena and Lucas decided to renew their vows. It wasn't exactly a wedding, more of an intimate ceremony in their apartment with just a few close friends and family. Helena wore a simple white dress, and Lucas wore the same suit he'd worn to their original wedding, though Helena didn't know that. They'd written their own vows, and when it was Helena's turn to speak, she looked at Lucas with tears in her eyes and said, "I can't promise you that I'll ever remember our first wedding, or our first kiss, or our first date. I can't give you back the Helena you married 5 years ago, but I can promise you this. I choose you today, knowing everything I know now, loving you for who you are to me in this moment. I choose our future over our past. I choose us." When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room, including Lucas's. For his vows, Lucas had brought something special. He pulled out a worn piece of paper, folded and refolded many times, the creases soft with age. "These are the vows I wrote for our first wedding," he said. "I've kept them in my wallet every day since then, and I want to read them to you now, because every word is still true." He unfolded the paper and began to read, his voice steady despite his emotion. "Helena, I vow to love you in sickness and in health, in remembrance and in forgetting. I vow to choose you every day, in every season, through every challenge. I vow to be your partner, your friend, your home. I vow to see you, truly see you, for exactly who you are, and to love you not despite your imperfections, but because of them. I vow to make you laugh, to hold you when you cry, to fight fair, and to never let the sun set on our anger. I vow to grow with you, to change with you, and to love you through every version of yourself you become." As he read, Helena realized that these vows had taken on a meaning Lucas couldn't have anticipated when he'd written them. He'd promised to love her in forgetting, and he'd kept that promise. They exchanged new rings, simple silver bands that Helena had chosen, because they didn't carry the weight of memories she couldn't access. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, again, and invited Lucas to kiss his bride, the kiss they shared was both familiar and new, a perfect metaphor for everything they'd been through. That night, After their guests had left and they were alone in their apartment, Lucas gave Helena one more gift. It was a small leather-bound journal, the pages blank and waiting. "What's this?" Helena asked, turning it over in her hands. "It's for us," Lucas said, "for our new memories. The ones we're making now. I know you found your old journal, and it caused you stress, made you doubt things, so let's start fresh. Let's fill this one with the story of us, the us we are now." Helena opened the journal to the first page and saw that Lucas had already written something. It read, "Day 1 of the rest of our lives. She forgot me, but I never forgot her. She fell in love with me twice. I'd say I'm the luckiest man alive, but luck has nothing to do with it. Love brought her back to me. Love always brings us back." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. Helena continued to have occasional memory flashes, but she stopped chasing them, stopped trying to force the memories to return. She focused instead on the life she was living, on the husband she loved, on the future they were building together. She and Lucas went on dates, traveled, made new friends, and created new traditions. They laughed together, argued occasionally, and always made up before bed. They were happy, truly happy, in a way that felt earned, fought for, precious. And then, 8 months after the accident, something happened that changed everything. Helena was at work, setting up a new sculpture installation, when she stepped back to get a better view and tripped over a ladder someone had left on the floor. She didn't hurt herself badly, just a hard fall that knocked the wind out of her and left her sitting on the gallery floor, dazed and embarrassed. But when the gallery director rushed over to help her up, asking if she was okay, Helena looked at her and said, "Rachel, when did you dye your hair?" Rachel stopped, confused. "Helena, my hair has been blonde for 3 years." And suddenly, like a dam breaking, the memories came flooding back. Not all of them, not in any organized way, but in a torrent of images and sensations and emotions that left Helena gasping. She remembered her wedding day, the way Lucas had cried when he saw her walking down the aisle. She remembered their honeymoon in Greece, swimming in impossibly blue water. She remembered fighting about the baby issue, but she also remembered making up, remembered the weekend at the vineyard, remembered feeling happy and loved and secure in their relationship right up until the accident. She remembered Lucas, all of Lucas, every version of him she'd ever known. And most importantly, she remembered loving him. Helena called Lucas immediately, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold the phone. "Lucas," she said when he answered, "I need you to come get me. Right now, something's happened." The panic in her voice had Lucas leaving work immediately, breaking several traffic laws to get to the gallery in record time. When he burst through the doors, he found Helena sitting on a bench, tears streaming down her face, surrounded by worried colleagues. "Helena, what's wrong?" he asked, kneeling in front of her, his hands framing her face. "Are you hurt? Should I call Dr. Reeves?" Helena shook her head, laughing and crying at the same time. "No, I'm okay. I'm better than okay. Lucas, I remember everything, our wedding, our honeymoon, our life together, all of it. It came back. It all came back." Lucas went very still, searching her face for any sign that she was confused or mistaken. "Everything," he whispered. "You remember our first date at that terrible Italian restaurant where the waiter spilled wine all over you?" Helena nodded, smiling through her tears. "And I laughed so hard I snorted, and you said it was the most beautiful sound you'd ever heard." Lucas pulled her into his arms, and Helena felt him shaking. "You remember our wedding night, when we got locked on the hotel balcony in our underwear and had to call the front desk?" Helena laughed. "And the manager brought us robes and a bottle of champagne, and we sat out there for hours just talking and watching the stars." They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other, both of them crying now, the weight of 8 months of loss and longing finally lifting. On the drive home, Helena couldn't stop talking, couldn't stop sharing memories as they surfaced, needing to prove to Lucas and to herself that they were real, that they were back. But as they walked into their apartment, something shifted. Helena looked around the space she'd been living in for months now, and instead of feeling like she was reclaiming her home, she felt like she was seeing a stranger's home. Everything was the same but different. The furniture had been rearranged. There were new photos on the walls, pictures from the last 8 months that she was in, but that belonged to a different version of their relationship. It was disorienting in a way she hadn't anticipated, having 2 sets of memories now, 2 parallel experiences of loving the same man. That night, lying in bed next to Lucas, Helena tried to process what was happening in her mind. She had her old memories back, yes, but they didn't erase the new ones. She remembered their first wedding, but she also remembered renewing their vows 6 months ago. She remembered their actual first date, but she also remembered the coffee shop where they'd started over. She remembered falling in love with Lucas the first time, and she remembered falling in love with him the second time, and somehow both experiences felt equally real, equally important. "Lucas," she said softly into the darkness, "are you awake?" He turned to face her, his hand finding hers under the covers. "Yes. I don't think I could sleep if I tried. My mind is racing." Helena squeezed his hand. "Mine too. Lucas, I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me." He propped himself up on one elbow, concern crossing his face. "Okay, I'm listening." Helena took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. "Getting my memories back is wonderful. I'm so grateful to remember our life together, our history. But Lucas, something strange is happening. I have 2 sets of memories now, 2 experiences of us. And the thing is, the second time, the time after the accident when I fell in love with you without remembering who you were, that felt just as real, just as powerful. Maybe even more so because it was a choice I made without any history, without any obligation. I chose you purely for who you are, not for who we'd been together." Lucas listened intently, and Helena continued. "What I'm trying to say is that I don't feel like I'm just returning to our old life. I feel like I'm integrating 2 lives, 2 loves, into something new. Does that make sense?" Lucas was quiet for a moment, thinking. "So you're saying that even though you remember everything now, you don't want to just go back to how things were before the accident?" Helena nodded. "Exactly. Because the truth is, the Helena who fell in love with you the second time is still here. She didn't disappear when my memories came back. And she learned things about us, about herself, that the old Helena hadn't figured out yet. She learned that our love doesn't depend on shared history or memories. She learned that you would fight for us even when it seemed hopeless. She learned that I could trust you completely, and I don't want to lose those lessons." Lucas pulled her closer, his voice thick with emotion. "Helena, you don't have to lose anything. We don't have to choose between the old us and the new us. We can be both. We can honor our past while building on everything we've learned in the present." Helena felt tears of relief on her cheeks. "You really think so?" Lucas kissed her forehead gently. "I know so. Because here's what I've learned over the past 8 months. Love isn't static. It grows, it changes, it adapts. The love I felt for you 5 years ago is different from the love I felt 6 months ago, which is different from the love I feel right now. And it's all real, all valid, all part of our story." Over the next few weeks, Helena worked on integrating her 2 sets of memories with the help of Dr. Reeves and their therapist. It was challenging, sometimes confusing, like trying to merge 2 different versions of a story into a single narrative. But gradually, she found a way to hold both experiences in her mind simultaneously, to see them not as competing histories, but as complementary parts of a larger whole. She realized that the accident, as terrible as it had been, had given them both something unexpected, a chance to see their relationship from a completely new perspective, to fall in love all over again with fresh eyes, to appreciate each other without taking anything for granted. It was a gift, wrapped in tragedy, but a gift nonetheless. One evening, about a month after her memories had returned, Helena was writing in the journal Lucas had given her. She'd been documenting their journey, capturing both the memories that had come back and the new moments they were creating. As she wrote, she realized something profound. She flipped back to the first page, to the words Lucas had written. "She forgot me, but I never forgot her. She fell in love with me twice." Helena picked up her pen and added her own words beneath his. "I lost my memory, but I never lost my capacity to love. And in losing everything, I discovered that love doesn't live in the past. It lives in every moment we choose each other. I fell in love with him twice, and I would do it again and again, in every lifetime, in every version of myself. Because some things transcend memory. Some things are written deeper than the mind can reach. They're written on the soul." The next morning, Helena woke up with an idea. She found Lucas in the kitchen, making breakfast, and said, "I want to do something. Will you come with me today?" Lucas looked at her curiously, but nodded. "Of course, where are we going?" Helena smiled mysteriously. "You'll see." She drove them to the place where they'd had their first post-accident coffee date, the small cafe in the arts district. But instead of going inside, she led him past it, down a side street he didn't recognize, and into an art supply store. Helena browsed the aisles purposefully, selecting canvases, paints, brushes, and other materials. Lucas watched her, intrigued but silent. When they got back to the apartment, Helena set up the supplies in their living room and turned to Lucas. "I want us to paint something together," she explained. "I want to create a visual representation of our story, all of it. The past I remember, the present we're living, the future we're building. Will you do this with me?" Lucas didn't hesitate. "Yes." They spent the entire day painting, not speaking much, just working side by side, each contributing to the canvas in their own way. Helena painted memories, fragments of their wedding, the vineyard, moments she'd recovered. Lucas painted the hospital room, the coffee shop, the renewed vows. They painted over each other's work sometimes, blending the images together until past and present became indistinguishable, until the canvas was a beautiful, chaotic tapestry of their love story. When they finally stepped back to look at what they'd created, Helena felt a sense of completion she hadn't felt before. "It's perfect," she said softly. "It's us. All of us. Every version." Lucas wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "It really is." That painting became the centerpiece of their living room, a constant reminder of where they'd been and where they were going. Friends who visited would ask about it, and Helena and Lucas would tell them the story, though they could never fully capture what it meant to them in words. It wasn't just a painting. It was proof that love could survive anything, even the loss of memory itself. It was a testament to the power of choosing someone again and again in every circumstance. It was their story, messy and beautiful and true. 6 months later, Helena was working late at the gallery when Lucas texted her, "Come out to the parking lot when you're done. I have a surprise for you." Intrigued, Helena finished up her work and headed outside. She found Lucas leaning against his car, holding a picnic basket and wearing a grin that told her he was up to something. "Get in," he said, opening the passenger door for her. "Where are we going?" Helena asked, but Lucas just shook his head. "You'll see. Trust me." They drove for about an hour, leaving the city behind, heading into the countryside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Helena found herself relaxing into the mystery of it all, content to just be with Lucas, going wherever he was taking her. Finally, Lucas pulled off the main road onto a gravel path that led to a small hilltop overlooking a valley. He parked and got out, coming around to open Helena's door. "Come on," he said, taking her hand. He led her to a spot on the hill where a blanket was already laid out, along with lanterns that he must have set up earlier. The view was breathtaking. The valley spread out below them, the last light of day making everything golden. "Lucas, this is beautiful," Helena breathed. "When did you do all this?" Lucas smiled as he helped her sit down on the blanket. "I came out here during my lunch break. I wanted to surprise you." He opened the picnic basket and started pulling out food, cheese, bread, fruit, wine, all of Helena's favorites. As they ate and watched the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, Helena felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. Gratitude for this moment, for this man, for the second chance they'd been given. "Lucas," she said, setting down her wine glass, "do you remember what you told me in the hospital, in those first days after the accident?" Lucas thought for a moment, then shook his head. "I said a lot of things." "Which part?" Helena smiled. "You told me that you would be whatever I needed you to be. A friend, a stranger, a companion. You said you would be patient, that you would wait for me to find my way back to you, however long it took." Lucas nodded slowly, remembering. "I meant every word." Helena reached out and took his hand. "I know you did, and I need you to know that I found my way back to you. Not just to the old you, not just to our old life, but to something better, something stronger." Lucas brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "You know what the hardest part was?" he asked. "Not knowing if you'd ever look at me the way you used to. Not knowing if I'd ever hear you say you loved me again. When you were in the hospital and you looked at me like I was a stranger, I thought I'd lost you forever. And then, when you started to care about me again, when I saw that spark in your eyes, I was so afraid to hope. But Helena, every day with you has been worth it. Every moment of pain, every second of uncertainty, it was all worth it to be here with you now." Helena felt tears welling up, but they were happy tears. "I fell in love with you twice," she said, echoing the words she'd written in their journal, "and if I had to do it all over again, I would, because loving you is the best thing I've ever done, memory or no memory." They stayed on that hilltop until late into the night, talking about everything and nothing, making plans for the future, reminiscing about both versions of their past. Helena told Lucas about the fragments of memory that still surprised her when they surfaced, and Lucas told her about the moments during her recovery when he'd almost given up hope, but didn't. They laughed about the awkward early days of their post-accident relationship when they'd both been trying so hard not to say the wrong thing. They talked about the baby discussion, and Helena admitted that now, with both sets of memories, she thought maybe she was ready to start trying. Lucas's face lit up at that, but he was careful not to push. "Only if you're sure," he said. "We have all the time in the world." Helena shook her head. "No, we don't. That's what the accident taught me. We don't have all the time in the world. We have right now, and I don't want to waste any more of our right nows being afraid." As they drove home that night, Helena reflected on the incredible journey they'd been on. 8 months ago, she'd woken up in a hospital room with no idea who she was or who the man at her bedside was. She'd been terrified, lost, convinced that she'd never feel whole again. But she'd been wrong. She was whole. Perhaps more whole than she'd ever been before, because she'd learned that identity wasn't just memory. It was choice. It was action. It was the way you treated the people you loved, the values you held, the person you decided to be in each moment. She'd lost her memories, but she'd found herself, and she'd found love twice over. When they got back to their apartment, Lucas carried the picnic basket inside while Helena followed, feeling pleasantly tired and deeply content. As she was getting ready for bed, she caught sight of their painting on the living room wall, illuminated by the soft glow of a lamp Lucas had left on. She stood there for a moment studying it, seeing both the chaos and the beauty in the overlapping images, the way their two stories had merged into one. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. Helena leaned back into him, fitting against him perfectly, the way she always had. "I'm thinking about how lucky we are," she said. "I'm thinking about how this could have ended so differently. I could have never remembered. You could have given up. We could have lost each other forever." Lucas rested his chin on her shoulder, looking at the painting with her. "But we didn't," he said simply. "We fought for this. We chose this. And that makes it even more precious." Helena turned in his arms, so she was facing him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "I love you, Lucas Chen. I loved you before I knew you, when my memory told me you were a stranger, but my heart recognized you anyway. I loved you when I was falling for you all over again, choosing you fresh every day, and I love you now with all my memories and all my heart. I love you in every timeline, every version of us. I love you completely." Lucas's eyes were bright with unshed tears as he looked at her. "And I love you, Helena Chen. I loved you when you knew me. I loved you when you forgot me. I loved you when you were finding your way back to me. And I love you every day for the rest of our lives, memory or no memory, through everything that comes." They kissed then, a kiss that held everything they'd been through and everything they would face together. And in that moment, Helena understood the deepest truth of their story. Love wasn't about remembering, it was about recognizing. And she recognized Lucas in her bones, in her blood, in the deepest part of her soul that no accident could touch. She'd lost her memory, yes, but she'd never lost him. And more importantly, she'd never lost her capacity to love him. That capacity had survived the crash, survived the amnesia, survived everything, because it wasn't stored in her brain. It was stored somewhere deeper, somewhere permanent, somewhere that transcended memory altogether. She'd loved him twice, but in truth, she'd never stopped loving him at all. The love had just found new ways to express itself, new paths to travel, new forms to take. And that was the real miracle. Not that her memories had returned, but that love had persisted even without them. Years later, when people asked Helena about the accident and its aftermath, she would tell them that it was the worst thing and the best thing that had ever happened to her. The worst because of the trauma, the loss, the pain she and Lucas had endured. But the best because it had taught her something invaluable, that love was a choice, not just a feeling. That commitment meant showing up every day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. That marriage wasn't about the memories you'd made together, but about the person you chose to keep making memories with. She and Lucas went on to have 2 children, a daughter named Grace and a son named Thomas, and Helena made sure to document everything, taking photos and videos and writing in journals, just in case. But as the years passed and her memories remained intact, she began to relax, to trust that her brain had healed, that the past would stay in the past, where it belonged. She never forgot what it felt like to forget, though. That experience was seared into her memory more vividly than almost anything else, and in a strange way, she was grateful for it, grateful for the perspective it had given her, for the way it had forced her to question everything and rebuild from the ground up. Grateful for the chance to fall in love with Lucas twice, to see him through fresh eyes and appreciate him in ways she might not have otherwise. Her amnesia had been a tragedy, yes, but it had also been a gift. It had shown her that the most important things in life weren't the ones you could remember. They were the ones you could feel, the ones you chose, the ones you lived every single day. And love, real, deep, abiding love, was one of those things. It didn't need memory to survive. It just needed two people willing to choose each other, again and again, through everything life threw at them. And that's exactly what Helena and Lucas did. They chose each other every day, in big ways and small ways, in the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones. They chose each other when things were easy and when things were hard. They chose each other when they remembered everything and even when they didn't. Because that's what love was in the end. Not a destination you arrived at, but a choice you made over and over, forever. Helena had lost her memory, but she'd never stopped loving Lucas. And in learning that truth, she'd discovered something even more profound, that she was capable of loving him twice, and that the second time was just as real, just as powerful, just as true as the first. Maybe even more so, because the second time, she'd loved him not because of their history, but in spite of its absence. She'd loved him for who he was in that moment, stripped of all context, all obligation, all expectation. She'd loved him purely, completely, unconditionally. And that kind of love, Helena realized, was the rarest and most beautiful kind of all. The kind worth losing your memory for, the kind worth finding your way back to, the kind worth choosing again and again for the rest of your life. Thanks for watching this incredible story. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel. Here at Heartfelt Storytime, you have new, beautiful stories every day. Don't miss out. See you next time.